Yeah. Yeah, good afternoon once again, Vuyo. So we continue to bring you coverage here from the Air Force Base in Swartkop. And a little bit earlier, we did see the arrival of the remains. They are, of course, inside this hangar at the moment, where we're hearing some gospel music coming out from out of there as well. But we're joined now by Ricardo Teixeira, who is a defense analyst with Defence Web, just to give us a little bit of analysis of quite a bit of knowledge that he has, in fact, from the defense world. So good afternoon to you, Ricardo. Thanks so much for your time. One of the things that you've talked about before we went on is the significance of this particular Air Force base. And you said, is it more of a sort of ceremonial resource that is used by our officials?
So where we currently are is formerly known as Air Force Base Swartkop, but it's currently known as, well, this side is the Air Force Museum. The other side of the base is now known as the Mobile Deployment Wing. This base seems to be used for a lot of ceremonies. I know the Women's Day Parade last year was held here. The Air Force Change of Colour Parade in October was also held here. So it's some significance. It's one of the oldest bases in the country. It's the oldest Air Force base in the country, but it is no longer an active Air Force base. You can read into that what you will, but it is an interesting choice to hold it here.
Yeah, but one of the things that you're able to see here, and I won't show them to you now, Vuyo, but one of the things that you are able to see here is some of the, I suppose, the Air Force resources that previously our military would have used in the past. And Ricardo earlier showing me, was it Roy Falk, yes, the very first one, the prototype sitting there behind us, and I'll show it to you perhaps a little bit later. But what it does do is it brings about the question of the sort of resources that our country really does have, and if there's confidence in our military resources, particularly what we have in Goma, as that has been a really big talking point, the information that as an analyst you've gathered about what we still need, what we do have, and what could be there.
So I think the public should be made more aware of, everyone always points towards the Roy Falk because of its success in previous deployments in the DRC. We only have 11 Roy Falk airframes in service. There were only 12 built, one was written off to my knowledge, and at AAD last year in September at Waterkloof Air Force Base, 2 were flying. For a long time, most of the fleet was grounded. In November, the 3 that were in the DRC as part of the UN mission were brought back. They are not currently airworthy and are undergoing, hopefully, a maintenance program to get them airworthy again. But I know that at least 2 are flying. The bigger problem is that the squadron they are attached to, because they've been grounded so long, many of the pilots no longer have valid currencies, so they are not cleared to fly combat missions. So even if they were all airworthy at the moment, that would be another issue we would have to deal with. And at the end of this all comes down to the underfunding of the Defence Force that's been going on for the last 15 years. We don't have the equipment and the resources at our disposal that we need now. There's a famous phrase by Donald Rumsfeld that says, you don't go to war with the army you want, you go to war with the army you have. And unfortunately, the army we have, as I said earlier, is on our knees. It doesn't have what it needs to be effective at the moment. Yeah,
I mean, that's going to be an issue, because when you talk about whether or not there's the licensing in place, you could certainly talk about the budget cuts, but it also sounds like a management issue, right? Or an administrative issue.
There are definitely some administrative issues, and yes, it's with the pilot currency, but there's some management issues. There are a lot of issues with the Defence Force that need to be addressed, and I hope that this becomes a bit of a turning point and a catalyst for change, because it's time that we start taking ourselves and our Defence Force seriously again, and we start investing in it. The motto of the Defence Force in the 2020 to 2025 strategic vision is a effective Defence Force for a democratic South Africa, and I think it's time we fulfill that promise.
Yeah, that's going to be and has been a big talking point for a while, though. I want to get into this. There are reports unconfirmed at this point around whether or not we have sent more troops into the DRC. And the question for many South Africans is, what do we do with those that have been stuck in Goma? I mean, any sort of information that you think we'll be able to get, or is it still a situation where we're not going to very well get a lot of information from the military, and that a lot of the proceedings or actions from now on is going to be quite top secret?
So as has been reported in the media, there have been, to my knowledge, at least 20 flights with IL-76s from Bloemfontein and here from Waterkloof to the DRC. I will not say where they have landed. There's some operational secrecy that must be respected. I can't comment further on the matter of reinforcements or what the Defence Force is doing. I think whatever it is that they're doing, we should remain tight-lipped and respect that they are remaining tight-lipped. As for the troops in Goma, they are confined to their bases. I spoke to Admiral Chabalala earlier, who confirmed to me that they do still have their weapons, but their ammunition is locked away. So there's a bit of a tense standoff where M23 knows that they do have ammunition and they could put up a fight again, but also our troops are aware that they are completely cut off and surrounded, and it wouldn't be a wise move. So it's a bit of a tense standoff in Goma at the moment, but those troops have been there for over a year, and regardless of whether or not the government wants to continue with the mission, those troops need to be rotated out. There needs to be a new rotation of troops. At Lohatla last year at Exercise Vukushlome, 7,500 troops were certified as combat ready. From that, they could pull who knows what from which units and send them there. We don't know what the government's planning on doing. There's been very little information that's been released, and I think both the fog of war and the veil of secrecy are quite thick right now.
Yeah, and part of that veil of secrecy, I imagine, is of course to deal with the fact that yes, we as South Africans are looking at what's being reported, but we're not the only ones, and that the international community watching very closely, and it being quite difficult for us to proceed with, even if the attempt is to get our troops out, to do so if that information is too readily available.
Yes, I mean, we can always talk about the US troops who gave up a secret bases location because they were using Strava to track their jogging runs. Thankfully, our troops aren't doing that, but there is a level of secrecy that needs to be maintained and respected. I do hope that whatever the government is planning is not a suicide mission, and that I hope all the troops come home safely.
Yeah. And just lastly, before I release you, as we reflect on this moment, and I think right now we're still seeing the sort of preparations towards the handing over and the memorial service taking place. But later on, we're going to be really looking at those bodies and really reflecting on the lives lost. But also, as we talk about the global conversation about how people see us, what this moment means for the confidence that we have in our military as a country. Also, how important it is to have that confidence.
So with that, I'll answer with a bit of an academic answer. Amongst international relations and military studies, the principle of deterrence rests on two pillars: capability and credibility. Unfortunately, the last 15 years of budget cuts and defence underfunding has taken away our capability, and now we're in a situation where that capability is needed and it isn't there, and as a result of that, we've lost our credibility. So ultimately, this has been a very damaging episode in terms of South Africa's deterrence. We've lost quite a bit of deterrence here, and it's quite a somber moment, and I hope it becomes a catalyst for change and a waking up moment.
Ricardo Teixeira there, thank you so much for speaking to us. He, of course, is a defence analyst with Defence Web, and a little bit earlier he was actually showing us the movement of the president. We do understand that at this moment the president is in the air making his way here so that he will be part of that memorial service that takes place this evening, Vuyo. But things really starting to quiet down. I imagine that anytime soon we're going to start seeing more officials starting to arrive, but the remains themselves closed off inside of that hangar where we saw them arriving earlier, but now closed inside, and some gospel music we can hear coming from inside the hangar. We'll come back to you a little bit later on, Vuyo, as we keep you updated live here from the Air Force Base.